Hello, everyone. Welcome to WorkDoneLive. You're here with me, Joe Rogers, and of course, Kirsten Campbell, my co-host, who is the marketing tornado. It's been rumored that she can actually read people's DNA. She can explain and describe any topic for her clients' benefit. My company is WorkDone, and we are a best practices discernment platform that operates at the intersection of process automation and knowledge management. So today we are discussing the reimagination of education in the future of work. And this is a pretty timely topic, given what's happening, pretty much what's been happening for the last year and a half, and what's probably going to continue happening. What was it that struck you about this topic, Kirsten?
I would have to say, well, first off, reading the Seth Godin, like that piece about like imagining education, I dropped in the chat for anybody who's following along, wants to investigate, highly recommend you read that. But it was like every line of it was like, oh my God, yes. And like, I guess it really struck me because as an old millennial, I almost feel like we were kind of the last ones that were ushered through this like broken system, but it was crumbling. But now, especially given, a pandemic, it's completely obliterated. And that's why, like, I thought it was such a perfect path forward. And it's almost easier. It makes more logical sense. It makes us not only better workers, better neighbors, better citizens, better everything. So it almost seemed, I don't want to say magic bullet, because such a thing doesn't exist, but we often hear of like, well, what's the alternative? Like what else could we do for an education system? And to have it so perfectly laid out like that, I just thought was so brilliant. And that's why I immediately was like, we need to bring this into the future of work, because I think it's so relevant. And it's something that companies should also be really promoting, because they're ultimately the ones that would benefit from it. So that was my first impression of it. Sure.
Well, after I read it, it reminded me of the Sir Ken Robinson, the British guy who he's given at least 3 TED Talks so far. But I remember watching the very first one long before I ever had a child, and I was totally just inspired and moved by what he said. And then I hadn't revisited that video until you sort of prompted that step, and it's so good. It's, if you look back historically, the origins of our the American education system, it was concocted by some captains of industry who realized that they were going to need trained workers, so they wanted to create factories to produce obedient people who could follow direction. And but not necessarily too willful or creative. That is my sort of slant on what they did. I'm sure there was some more altruistic intentions there. I would hope anyway. But that was around the beginning of the 1900s, the 20th century, and now, at the beginning of the 21st century, it's like our public schools are not that good. Everybody knows that. There's a few exceptions, and all parents are trying, they're fighting tooth and nail to get their kids into those schools. And then everybody else who can afford it sends their kids to private schools. And it's something that Mr. Robinson said. Do I have to say Sir Robinson? Will he be upset if I? Yeah, okay. I mean, your Canada is still part of the British Empire, isn't it?
We are. We have crown corporations. Yes.
So do you have to call him Sir Robertson, Sir Robinson, Sir Ken Robinson?
No, I subscribe more to, not that I've watched him in forever because he's kind of gone off the deep end in a lot of ways, but I'm more subscribed to the Bill Maher of like, I'm not calling anybody Her Royal Highness, Sir, like, no, I'm not calling anybody that. Like, you got a first name, that's what we're calling you. That's
There you go. I think that's probably best. Yeah. So Ken, um,
Buddy Ken.
he commented that all around the world, all the education systems are built like it's like, STEM, sort of like science and English and math are at the top. And then the, humanities and the liberal arts and all that stuff is a little lower. And then like, dance and painting, that's like, at the bottom of the barrel. And it's really interesting that it's global that way. And the title of his first talk was, "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" And now that I've got a daughter in the 5th grade, she's kind of a unique case because, or I should say, she didn't follow the mainstream because for the first 3.5 years, say 4 years, she was in a play-based school where there were no desks and all they did was play outside all day, every day. There were learning opportunities available to them, but the kid, it was up to the kid if they wanted to do it or not. There were no set instructions, which I thought it was crazy talk the first time I heard it. But then I started to understand, it's like, oh, instead of, learn this, learn that, memorize this, memorize that, it's like cultivating a sense of wonder and inquisitiveness. And so then they want to learn and they go pursue stuff because they're interested, not because they're told to. And it's so I got the beauty and the genius of what they're doing. But then I was raised the old-fashioned way, and it's like I'm looking at the world as it is today. It's like, okay, I think she needs to go to a public school now. And we got totally lucky. I mean, it's a sort of, what's the euphemism, an urban school, inner city, but the teachers are great. They care. We've had the second good teacher in a row now. And she's on a track to go to a middle school combination, middle school, high school, that's in the top 2% nationally. So we totally scored there. But that's kind of beside the point. It's Sir Robinson says, that he moved from England to Los Angeles. And in LA, he had conversations with these alternative education people who, did all these great things, and he enumerated them and they all sounded wonderful. And he closed by saying, my question is, why are they alternative? Why isn't this the norm? And, it's a really good question. I think it comes down to human nature and resistance to change. And it's like, this is what I had when I was growing up. And look at me, I turned out okay, which, I used to say that. I stopped saying that because it limits what my daughter can do. It's like, I don't want her to have my experience. I want her to have her experience. It took me a long time to learn that and restrain myself. So, it's a very vast topic. And we just kind of decided on it at the last minute.
Very much a whim. It was inspired by Seth. So there you go.
Sure. And Seth's comments were, very much in line with that.
Well, that's what I found, like your buddy Ken, as much as he's right about everything, and there wasn't really anything that I disagreed with him on, it was definitely a lot higher level than I guess Seth's contribution, which to me looked a lot more tangible. Like that to me was more of a blueprint that people could actually follow, as opposed to like, yeah, that's a great concept. Now what do we do? I don't have anything sort of tangible. Like I actually sent the Seth article to somebody I know who homeschools their kids. It's called unschooling. And so they were like, yeah, that's like pretty much exactly what we try to teach with like the unschooling and stuff like that. So it was so interesting to have their perspective on it, where they're like, oh yeah, because they do the same thing where it's like self-directed learning, like project-based stuff and like things like that. So it sounds similar to like what your daughter's early days in school were like.
It's
You're frozen, my friend. You're drinking coffee eternally. I'll join you. I'll have some water. Cheers. Still frozen.
Can you hear me?
I can now. You're unfrozen. You stopped drinking coffee. There we go.
But I could hear you. You couldn't hear me.
You were frozen.
So I was talking to myself.
Yeah. I don't know if you're letting me talk or if you're just frozen. Then I realized you were frozen. So.
Come on, you know me. I'm not that much of a gentleman. So yeah, I think it's such a vast undertaking, you know. And it's probably one that's only going to happen in the like grassroots sort of homeschooling, and then maybe they start taking over public schools. I mean, here in LA, there's this whole thing with charter schools, and those are like, they get state money, but they're private companies and they share like facilities with the public schools. And sometimes the public school, you know, gets the bad stuff and the charter school gets the good stuff. It's insane. I don't understand it.
I don't know charter schools either. I remember hearing my introduction to them was in that TV show Togetherness from a couple of years ago. And that was like one of like the mom's like main goals was to like get this charter school going. It seems insane to me as a Canadian because it's like this like weird hybrid, like is it public, is it private? Like it's so weird.
And there was very little accountability. Yeah. Actually, John Oliver a few years ago did a piece on it, and it's just freaky, the stuff that happens. Yeah, how to, considering what's coming in the future of work, how do we, and we don't know necessarily what the jobs are going to look like. Chances are, you know, if you're going to become a bookkeeper, that's a bad idea. An accountant, maybe. An attorney, maybe. I mean, a lot of this stuff is going to be subsumed by AI, which means only the exceptional, sort of really difficult, top thorny issues will require a human, or at least everything should probably require a human to review, but a lot of the basic stuff, a lot of paralegal stuff is going to get automated. So then it's like, okay, white, you know, first it was blue collar jobs, you know, automation, robots in the car industry, and then white collar jobs. It seems like the last bastion will be creative, you know, the creatives. And even AI is starting to infringe upon that. I mean, you've heard of GPT-3.
Oh yeah, but like I'm not that worried as a creative on that sense of like the day. I mean, I've seen AI try to pump out like a movie script or something after reading whatever, being trained, and it's just hilarious. And so that's the type of thing where it's like, you're not gonna be able to write a bio for somebody to capture their, you know, the soul of their career and like that part of it. Like I'm not all that worried on that front.
That's not going to happen. I concur. But you know what? I'd have to. It's one of the 1,000 links I have open. There's a site where it's called GPT-3 wrote this, and it's like it starts out with a few words in bold, and then everything else is non-bold. And so the 3 bolded words are human created and everything else is computer created. And it's actually not bad. I'll have to find it and send it to you. I wasn't thinking about it. So I think there will be creativity, but it's not going to be on the order of, like the amazing stuff that just blows people away. It's, have you ever, I'm sure you've probably read a blog, like somebody paid somebody else to write a blog about a topic. So the person did research on that topic and wrote a blog. And it, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's just average. And it seemed to me like the GPT-3 AI could do average, could generate average content.
That I totally agree with you. Like if it's like a super basic, like, the crap that you read from like, I paid someone $10 online to write this blog, and you're like, it reads like you paid somebody $10 online to write this blog. Like, I think AI will easily be able to do that, but I find it more sort of like hilariously ironic / depressing is that public school, like schooling, has worked so hard to stomp out all of our creativity. Yet hilariously, creativity will be the only way for us to actually like accelerate out of the corner that AI has sort of put us in, is that like it's going to be creative people who are coming up with new things and something on crypto or whatever. Like it's going to be somebody who does something like that just creates this entire new thing that no one's even thought of or conceived yet.
Yeah, and that AI will never think of, because it has nothing to train it to think that way.
Exactly.
So
like, in the sense of like similar to like I was in a meeting last week and I made this comment and like everybody was blown away by it, but like in the sense of in the 90s, like before Amazon, the internet was just like, okay, we'll go on MSN Messenger. Like, all right. But Amazon showed us what the internet could do. And so from that, we were all like, oh, and then everything changed. It was game on. But that moment hasn't happened yet in crypto. And I think that that's where the next huge potential to like consumerize it. Because like in a way, Amazon sort of consumerized the internet for us in a way that we never even conceived of before that came along. And it showed us, and we were like, oh, I get it now. And so that's sort of on the horizon and awaiting us, but no one's done that yet. And I think that's probably going to be the next version of like, oh, the internet was like the 90s and the 2000s. I think that crypto is going to be the next version of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sure. I think it's been on the fringe. It's no longer fringe, quite honestly. I know upstanding, regular, normal, mainstream people who, like one guy, he put, I forget the name of the coin, but he did quite well on some token I'd never heard of. And it's like, whoa, but that's the last thing I expected from this guy, pretty conservative. So you're absolutely right. The thing is, where, like, you think about technological advances, like, Steve Jobs was thinking about a PDA, like Newton. You remember Newton? And that crashed and burned. It was a little early for its time. And then, iPhone changed everything. And it's sort of like, there's a flash of inspiration there, but it's also a lot of like hard work and trial and error and, shipwrecks along the way. And then you look at like, oh, okay, well, dot bombs, all those companies in the late 90s, early 2000s, it's like, and that was just hysterical. But it definitely, and then that gave birth to the Web 2.0. And the thinking that went into, oh, okay, well, and then Facebook or social media, and then something like Waze, where it's like, oh, wait a second, we're pulling together these different services and mashing them up to come up with something new. There's a lot of those apps out there, so it's I think the type of out of the box thinking to create those types of jumps, is not being. It's not in the curriculum, right? It's not in it's more like what's 3 times 2 plus 1, which it's kind of important that you know how to do it, but in reality, everybody's going to use their phone or their whatever. But you know, I go back and forth because I'm a product of, you know, the old way, the old guard. But I see the benefits. But it's like it's almost too intangible, you know. It's like, well, if my daughter had stayed at that play-based school through 12th grade, well, I don't think she could say through 6th grade, 7th grade. You know, it's I feel like she would have had I honestly don't know. It's a huge leap of faith for me because I'm a science guy. I'm a logical guy. But there were parents there, you know, musicians and the Hollywood creative types, and they, you know, all their kids go through that school and they're not worried at all about the academics, which is a different way of thinking for me.
Yeah, no, that academics was the only thing that mattered in our household. Like, I remember my parents being like, doesn't matter what you get in music, doesn't matter what you get in PE. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter about art, as long as it doesn't drag down your average. So you still have to be good enough, but it's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, it's that sort of that there's killing the creativity. So
Sure. You know, Seth Godin's list curriculum, it's like starting with statistics. It's like, holy crap, really? How do you teach a first grader statistics? I guess it's possible.
yeah, like anything can be age-based, but I think more what he's sort of getting at is once you teach somebody to think and be creative, that intersection is where the magic happens. And like, it sort of like all the things, there's so many things I've forgotten from schooling, but you can remember, you know, the scientific process, or, you know, like take your notes down, and like, it's little things like that that kind of stick with you. Or like how to be able to, like being able to write, like actually being able to write a persuasive essay. Like that's something I learned and was able to refine over the years. But if that was the only thing that I really got out of it, then like, I mean, nowadays people can't spell to save their lives and it drives me mental. So there's little things like that that were obviously useful, but then everything I see on the internet, there's spelling mistakes everywhere and nobody cares about grammar and nobody cares about things. So like, I know I'm going to be the last one still hanging on to that. And I'll be like, okay, grandma, like wonderful. Yeah, no one cares, but there. Like, I know that. I know it's coming and it's very depressing, but then in the grand scheme of things, like, does it really matter? To me? Yes, but to other people, probably not. So.
Sure. You know, when I'm texting, I frequently will just use lowercase. But then it depends who I'm talking to. Sometimes I'll use proper grammar and punctuation. But it seems a bit old-fashioned if I'm just like saying, hey, you know, go look at this. It's like, I just type the letters and I don't worry about any, it's like talking, you know?
That's madness. Like I used the word thwart the other day in a text and someone was like, how did you just use that? Like, so I'm that person. So
what did you do? I missed it.
I used the word thwart, like I was thwarted.
Oh, I used the word thwarted this week too.
You use it in a text message though? Because probably not.
In an email. Yeah.
See, that's close. They're cousins. But like, so I use that in a text because I tried to scam a company out of second in-store pickup. Long story, great story. My Life's a Seinfeld episode. But anyway, so then I was like, I was thwarted. It didn't work. And so, but they were like, did you just text the word thwart? I was like, yes, I did. So.
Hey, when you get the chance, you got to go for it.
Oh, I'm going to be the old person in the old folks home being like, I remember when people knew how to spell. I remember when we used punctuation, and then they're going to be like, whatever, just sedate her. So it'll all be fine. So.
Yeah. It's definitely going that way. And, you know, without veering too far off the topic, oh man, I'm just reading so much stuff. I lose track of where I encountered it, but a person who would know expressed a concern about the ability for young people of today to have an attention span longer than a few seconds. Because, and I remember, I'm aging myself, back when MTV was like a big deal and it came out in the 80s, and you went from these sort of long shots far away, without an edit, showing the band performing on the stage, to like a cut every like half a second, like, and it was like, whoa, this gives me a headache, and I realized that it was kind of rewiring my brain so that I couldn't have a long, consistent sort of stream, thought. My attention span was shortening, and I can see it. It's happened more to me, since I started using social media. Thanks, LinkedIn. But whatever. It's. I think I frequently tell my, I tell my daughter that I'm trying to help her learn how to think, as opposed to just, she'll come back and say, oh, so-and-so said, something crazy. And it's like, do you believe her? She said, well, yeah. It's like, well, that's actually, I remember it was, somebody at her school told her that in high school, lunch is only 8 minutes long. She was worried about that. And I'm like, do you believe her? She's like, well, she has an older sister who went, so she would know. So yeah, I believe her. It's like, well, how long is lunch for you right now in 5th grade? She's like, oh, we get, 30 minutes or something like that. So why would it be less in high school? Why would it be shorter? Oh, I don't know. It's like, because you got to walk out of the classroom. You got to go get your lunch. Got to find a place to sit. You got to eat, and you got to, run around a little. So do you really think it's going to be 8 minutes only? She's like, I guess not.
That might be more of a gullible type situation as opposed to a lack of critical thinking.
Yeah, definitely some gullibility, but also, critical thinking, it goes hand in hand. It's like, she was, I think she thought about it and she decided to believe it. So as opposed to just believing straight away, you know what I mean? That's gullible if whatever is said, you believe. Mm-hmm. But if somebody says something and you think about it and you believe it, well, that's critical thinking.
But that's also exactly reflective of our culture right now, where nobody fact checks. People are taking, horse medicine, horse paste instead of a free vaccine, and it's just like, it's so symbolic of like, just believe every piece of garbage that comes across your desk or that's told to you. Well, look where we are.
Right. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. Mm-hmm. There was a case where, I don't know if you're up on these school boards. Like there was one school board meeting where these parents were threatening a guy who they said they, insisted on a mask mandate. And they're like, we know where you live, we're going to come. It was very threatening. Well, I guess yesterday, down in the same part of the country, a junior in high school got up and spoke in front of the school board saying that his grandmother was a teacher and she died of COVID. And, he wants people to wear masks. And people in the audience laughed at him. It's like, woo.
Wow.
It's it's so, and there's this one woman who's rolling her eyes and looking around, and she's very clear. It's very clearly who she is. The newscaster said, we're trying to reach this woman, but we can't seem to locate her. But she's now like internationally infamous. It's like, oh, your grandmother died because she caught COVID.
Yeah, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That's the partially misinformation, but also culture in the sense of, because like if you think about it, like, I think the intersection with the folks who don't know the masks and stuff like that in schools and whatever, I think it comes from a place of powerlessness, because these people, like, you have no power at home, you have no power at work, you have no power for anything. Like, if you think about it, you know, in the 50s, you had a strong union, you had all the things that Americans love to talk about with like the glorious 50s that they love so much. You had strong unions, good wages, you know, you could buy a house on one salary from a high school grad. Like, you actually had a say in things. Whereas now it's like, we've got a dude who's a trillionaire fighting with another guy to go to space, which is something that governments used to do. And now we're at the point where individuals are doing that. It's not surprising from that perspective that so many people feel powerless. And so, I'm not going to let them give me a vaccine is the only vestige you have left to cling to, because you have nothing else. And that's it.
Definitely powerlessness, you know. But when it's there's no shortage every day. It's like such and such, you know, pastor who railed against the vaccine just died of COVID. Such and such right-wing personality, radio personality, you know, died of COVID. It's like,
I love that song. I'm like, Siri, play it again. Like, please, like, give me more of those. A, it's Darwinism. B, it's a message to it's great marketing for everybody else. But it's just one of those things where, like, even here, like, you get in a car accident, like, you are not going to be like, somebody had to wait 6 months to try to get a mammogram because the hospital's filled with COVID patients and now the unvaccinated ones. And you're like, yeah, like, if you were to get in like a car accident, like, I was reading something, some dude's kid, his appendix burst while waiting 6 hours in the emergency room because it was full of unvaccinated patients.
right.
So it's like, and that's what, going back to like Seth's article in particular, when it comes to the history and propaganda part, that's something that I think is so essential, especially nowadays, because it's almost like the exact replication of what happened before. And so I think if people could see, like, oh, this isn't our first rodeo, you know, like, this isn't the first vaccine passport we've had. Because before, up until now, you had to have a polio vaccine to get into school. You had to have a whooping cough vaccine to get into school. So vaccine passports are nothing new. So it's like, if you've had it for every other vaccine, the COVID one shouldn't be any different. And so that's what's so interesting, is it's this cultural moment. It's this whole thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not so sure it's a moment, though. I think
no, terrifyingly, I don't think it's a moment at all. So
it's here to stay.
Weirdly, or I was reading an article this morning, it was on The Atlantic, it was something about like the 20th anniversary for 9/11. And the guy who's writing it, I think he was in intelligence in like the White House, whatever, and something like that. And he was talking about like all the ways that America's response actually made things worse. And they bungled everything. And the main thing that he had said was the thing actually that struck me based on what you said earlier, was he was talking about how before 9/11, like, intelligence that would come across the desk of somebody at the CIA or the FBI or whatever was always vetted. And he said, he described it as like, it was a fire hose that by the time it actually got to the president's desk, it was a trickle of water, and it was everything. It was just what he needed to know, whatever was important, those type of things. And he noticed that over the 20 years since, he said that fire hose goes all the way to the top, and that he said nobody verifies their information. Every tip comes across as sacred, no matter how ludicrous it is, because it could be a terrorist attack. And the way that it completely, like, the response from the 17 minutes after the first plane hit, he said everything after that was a complete and utter failure. And so that to me is interesting in the sense of, it's very symbolic of like our culture, where we believe anything nowadays because somebody on the internet told you, you know?
Right. Or disbelieve everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's very interesting. You know, did I ever tell you my 9/11 story?
No, I love a good 9/11 story.
Well, so I think it was actually end of '99. I started a project with the city of New York So it was a pretty sweet gig. I was 3 weeks in New York and then 1 week working from home here in LA. And they started me out in a hotel, and I was able to work into an apartment in Brooklyn. It was great. Um, I was working in Lower Manhattan on the corner of Water and John Street, which is right near South Street Seaport, and there's a lot of stuff down there. It's just a few blocks away from the World Trade Center. And the morning of the 11th, I had left my place. Actually, I was about to leave, listening to the radio, and there was a report of a fire at one of the Twin Towers, and that's all. It just kind of registered as I was going out the door, and I had to walk about 10 minutes to get to the subway. And then as I was going down into through the turnstile, I saw the guy talking to two ladies, and he said, it's two planes, it's two planes. I didn't know what he was talking about. And so my train, which normally would go right into Broadway, Fulton, Nassau, which is the stop, it's a major intersection down there at the subway station. It actually was rerouted up to Union Square. And then I had to take another train down to Broadway and Wall, and that's where I got off. And so I came up Broadway, and I'll never forget. I'm looking up, and all I see are people on this side, like they're all standing up, like gawking, and I'm coming up from below. And then as I come up further, I look over and I see the towers, and I see smoke coming out of the towers. And I look at them, and I look at the towers, and I'm like, huh. And I just sort of keep walking because, I was late, a little late. It was around 9 o'clock already. And in retrospect, I came to realize that what they were looking at, the reason they had that sort of slack-jawed expression was because they were watching the jumpers. And I didn't actually hang out to watch. I slowly made my way. And there's going up Broadway, there's a street called Maiden Lane, and then there's John Street. And Maiden Lane is actually where the Federal Reserve is. And I turned on Maiden Lane and went through sort of a diagonal hallway through a building to get to John Street. And as soon as I got to John, it was like there was an earthquake. And I remember my first thought was, oh, there's no subway under here. And then I turned and looked, and there was this huge wall, like 6-story wall of like gray, just dust, smoke, death metal, like coming at me. I'm like, oh, I guess I should run. So I run to the corner to my building, and the guy's like, you can't come in here. So then I run, east to Water Street, and I look to the right towards Maiden Lane, which was the street I was just on, and that black cloud was like, so if I had been on that street that I was just on, I probably would have been blown into the East River. So I'm like, oh, can't go that way. So then I look to the left, heading north, and like the Brooklyn Bridge is supposed to be right there, which is what I would have taken to go home, but I couldn't see it because it was in the cloud. And so I was, thus began, I think I was walking for about 6 hours that day in dress shoes and a suit. And it had started out as such a beautiful day.
It was. I always remember the weather on 9/11. It was so beautiful.
It was. It's a perfect day. And yeah, I ended up walking through Chinatown, and there was a dry cleaner who was closing his shop, laundry guy. And I asked him if I only had my cell phone. Of course, it was Sprint. Sprint had the antenna on top of the building. Buildings were now down, so no signal. And this guy let me call. I called my ex-wife's sister, and I called my brother. So I got two calls up, and so they knew we were alive. And I got home around 3:30. Ended up crossing over the Williamsburg. I'm sorry. There's the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and the Williamsburg Bridge. So we crossed over, not Williamsburg, it's the Manhattan Bridge, sorry. And I'll never forget, there's a like the Hasidic Jewish population. There's a large community there. And as we were crossing the bridge, these guys were passing out water. So I was like, thank you. And then I found a black car to get me back to my place, and which is like an unofficial taxi in New York City. And that was on a Tuesday. I got a call Thursday afternoon from my boss, Sal, and I didn't know, what anybody's status was. And he's like, Joe, good to hear from you. I thought you were dead. We need you at the coroner's office. It's exactly what he said. And we ended up, my team, because we couldn't go back to work. I mean, that whole part of town was shut down. So the medical examiner's office was First Ave and 30th Street, I believe. And that was where all the body parts and bodies from ground zero were coming there to be ID'd and tagged and properly handled. And the family bereavement center was set up actually on a pier on the west side, so that these wives from New Jersey could bring in their husband's toothbrush, or whoever, the spouse, the other way around, so they could check DNA, and based on the match, they could issue a death certificate. And on the second floor of the medical examiner's office, or the morgue, we shared a room with the NYPD Computer Crimes Unit. And these were the guys managing the whiteboard, counting how many missing, how many found, how many dead. And that went out to the media every night. And we ended up my team, we ended up tag team developing a document management workflow system to process the forms and the pictures from ground zero. And that would head over to the bereavement center, and then that would kick off the death certificate issuance system, which up until that time had been completely paper-based. And now it was like they had to optimize in a hurry, because these people needed to get their life insurance checks. These families are just waiting on those checks. So it was kind of cool, actually, because I got to do something. It got old real quick of watching video replays of the planes hitting the towers, until some, genius decided maybe we shouldn't keep doing this. So they stopped showing it. But that still took a while. It was pretty traumatizing. And yeah, I'll never forget. It was on 9/11 that there's a core team of us that we just rallied, and every morning, most of them are actually, I'm the only one who's out west. They're all back east, but we all text each other the morning of 9/11.
Coming up.
2 days, yeah. It's kind of crazy. Everything.
You guys should pour one out. Have an official Zoom.
That's, you know what? Maybe we should. Do
it.
It's a good idea. Thank you for that. Now that why not? There's no reason not to.
Well, everyone's on Zoom, everyone's home. It's like, why not? It's been 20 years. It's not like it's like, 18, it's 20. I feel like this is fate. You gotta get in there.
Good idea. 20-year reunion. Yeah. It's, I don't know. We've diverged from the topic, but
still learning. So you taught yourself, because of your ability to think, you taught yourself the quickest way to be able to get the uptake on the document management at the time. So there you go.
It was funny because I showed up that first Thursday night, 2 nights later, in shorts and a t-shirt, and the place was surrounded by law enforcement, different agencies, different states, state troopers, Pennsylvania, everybody. They were guarding that building like it was Fort Knox. And it was thick cement, so I wasn't able to call in, and I'm standing outside for a while, and somebody came out, and they came and brought me and said, this guy, he needs to be in here. And I'll never forget, because it was 24/7, and I remember I was trying to figure something out, and I did, and I'm like, yes. And one of the police came over, this police lady, she's like, what are you doing? Why are you happy? What did you like? So we kind of described it to her, like, oh, okay.
Important work.
Yeah, no, it was, I'll never forget New York City in the months, I would say maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks after 9/11, after things started to reopen and at least except for downtown. And everybody was like really nice to each other and super like considerate and like, oh, are you okay? Oh no, after you. And there was, if you've ever been, this is probably true in any city, if you're on a subway and you're coming up and it's rush hour and everybody's like going up the whether it's stairs or an escalator, if the person at the top of the stairs stops,
Yeah, they'll kill them.
so that's what happened. And somebody yelled, "Move it, asshole!" And then it was like back to old New York. It was like the spell was broken. It was really funny. It was palpable. It was like, okay, I recognize this.
Yeah. I often joke. I'll often be like, oh yeah, something, XYZ. It's like the first few weeks after 9/11, and everyone gets exactly what I mean, because it was that like, oh no. But you know what's interesting, and that shows you how far our culture has shifted, is that we never had that with the pandemic. There was never that we're all in this together. There wasn't that couple of weeks of like, we're awesome. It was like, fuck you, I will eat your mother, I will take your toilet paper, like, get out of here. And so that's so interesting to me. And that, like, I mean, 9/11 was horrific to everybody, and it's obviously everybody remembers it, different scale than a pandemic, but like just that vibe just wasn't there.
No, I think they tried to do it online from time to time, like, or people, singing from their balconies, or, doing the drive-by parades for health services people.
Yeah, and then they cut all their wages after all the publicity ended, they cut all the wages and they charge parking and shit for all the medical people. So it's like, all right.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. But my only point is, I think there was a period where some people believed that we were all in it together. That was my sense.
It was depressingly small comparatively, because I think
I would agree.
it was definitely a global thing, and people were like, oh wow, like that's terrible. Like it was definitely something that even globally we were all sort of like, whoa, reeling from. But in particular, America was like, oh, like we'll be tighter, like we'll be more cohesive, and that didn't last long. So
no, it was there was always the story of somebody had a pickup truck who was trying to, corner the market on toilet paper.
yeah, exactly. And that's the sort of different version of like, oh, okay, so that's more of like our worst impulses. So
But what's interesting is, never before in history had the whole world been focused on a single problem. That was interesting. And, sort of in a non-physical sense, I think we all felt that and, contributed in some way, which is, I can't, in some sort of quantum mechanics sort of way. But it didn't seem to work because things got worse.
Yeah, like, or do you mean worse after the pandemic or after 9/11? You got to be more specific here.
The code, like, we thought we were out of it, and then it got worse, like with Delta variant.
Isn't there now a third one? I just heard something of a third one now that apparently the vaccine.
MU.
Yeah.
And they're saying that it's resistant to vaccines.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. It's like, oh, great. Like, well, that's what happens when a vaccine is able to run, or a virus is able to run wild and mutate. If we'd got it early, perhaps this wouldn't have happened.
Right. But you know what? New Zealand got it early. Yeah, Australia did to a lesser degree. And Australia is like having a hell of a time now. So,
comforting.
What's that?
That is mildly comforting to know that.
Yeah, mildly.
But yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. what the right answer is, aside from just living on a boat in the middle of the ocean and not dealing with anybody.
Sounds great. Like,
Just eating fish, although there's a big patch of plastic garbage out in the middle of the Pacific. So even the fish you eat, you're probably going to be taking in plastic, petrol.
yeah. And then the ocean will be on fire, so that'll all be great. So yeah.
That'll be great. Yeah, it's an interesting time. But back to the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Seth is the man. I used to read every time he got something new, I would go read it. The guy is just like, he cranks this stuff out.
Well, I thought every day you get the email for his blog, and most of the time you're just like, damn, where's he come up with this? It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
God, like brilliant. Love it.
Mm-hmm. After statistics, he mentions games, communication, history and propaganda, citizenship, real skills. Hard to measure things like honesty, perseverance. Is honesty a skill? I don't think so. It's a value.
So, and it's something you got to practice. So,
empathy, perseverance, keeping promises. That's kind of a skill.
yeah.
Trust. Is trust a skill? I wouldn't. No.
I think making yourself trustworthy, I think, is a skill, because it's one thing to be like, trust me, and you're like, I wouldn't trust you as far as I could throw you, but then actually making yourself like qualified to be trustworthy, I think, is a skill.
All right. Humor, is humor a skill?
Definitely, you got to practice it.
All right. So anything you practice is a skill.
I would say that's one of the largest criteria for a skill, would be to practice it. Yeah.
Okay. I will take your word for it.
You don't have to. I really don't know. I'm just saying, like, to me, like, yeah, that seems more like a skill.
Yeah. And then the scientific method. Mm-hmm. Learning. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's so how do you, the trick is, how do you get your kid through, the public school system and have them not lose their spark, to not get beat down into an automaton. I'm not sure how to do that. I think travel is definitely part of it. You got to get it to some other country, some different language, different culture.
There is something and I mean, I can speak to this personally, like there is something particularly humbling in your early days to be in a country where you can't read anything, you can't speak to anybody, and you need to make yourself understood. That is something that I think is, like, when we were living in Thailand, when I was in grade 4 and 5, like, it's frustrating, it's exhausting, it's all those things, but that also makes sure you will never, ever, ever have a problem with an immigrant, somebody who doesn't speak English, because you know exactly what that feeling is. And that goes back to the empathy piece and like all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, like I would agree that travel is probably a really great way to do that and to show kids how other people live. Like for us, we saw people like begging on the street with one leg, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, and like, it's very eye-opening when you're young.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of effort put out by, certain types of parents to shield their kids from seeing that. They don't want them to even know it exists.
Which is
it's
pathetic.
Like, oh, how is that a good thing? What are you creating? Like this fake version. But here's the thing. Everybody's reality is real to them, even though it's, ignoring whatever, Yeah, I don't know. It's, and then, another topic is the different modes of learning. Like some people can sit down and read chapters at a time and retain it and spit it back out. And, I have to read sometimes. That's not a problem, but other times I'll have to read the same page like 3 times to figure out what the hell's going on, which bugs the hell out of me. It's like I should not, but it depends on the writer and how.
Well, it depends how tired you are, your mood, all the, like if I've got to sit down and read something and I'm not in the mood, but I still have to read it, that's a whole different experience than if I'm like, oh, let's see, click, and I have to read something, you know?
Right. Yeah. Correct. And Sir Robinson talks about the girl who's like super fidgety and can't sit still, and they go to see a counselor, and the counselor puts her in a room and says, "Oh, I got to go talk to your mom. We'll just hang out here." And the counselor turns on a radio, so it's just the kid with the music in this room, and the counselor and the parent go out and look through the window, and the kid's immediately out just jumping around and dancing to the music. And the counselor says to the parent, your child doesn't have a learning disability. Your child is a dancer. She can't sit still because it's like some people learn through movement.
Yeah.
It's not about, so sometimes my daughter, she's like, she's still jumping on the furniture. I'm like, you're going to break that, please stop doing that. But I've throttled myself way back when she can't, sort of control herself, because it's clearly not that she is trying to bother me. It's just that when you're young, you've got this power plant in you that's going 110% all the time.
Well, your energy, like oftentimes, like when we would get like that, my parents would open the back door and like go run around in the backyard, like get that energy out, go run, scream at each other, play, that, and come back inside. And you're like, okay. So maybe it's even just as simple as that. They need a bit of stimulation, exercise, like that kind of thing.
Right. And at her old school, she did that all day, every day.
You're not doing it.
And now she's sitting at a desk. They call it a desk school, which is, for us, would be just a normal school. But another moment when I realized that her initial play-based school actually was good. We were on a playground. This was a few years ago. And there were some jungle gyms, like the bars that you swing from. And there was a kid who was at least 2 or 3 years older than her, much taller, bigger. She couldn't swing from bar to bar. She was not strong enough. And my kid was all over the place. And it was like, that was the benefit of that school. And when the kid is young, they're not meant to be sitting in a desk hour after hour. They need to be, and the thing of it is they learn stuff in the real world, from building a fort, or there's any sort of like the teachers will say, oh, this is what a lever is. They'll get a rock and put a stick on it. And it's like, what in learning, they actually do that. So in playing, they learn. So I think that's like the best way of all. But it's got to be balanced with where the world is now. And maybe that's me hedging. I don't know.
Well, if you're lucky enough that your kid doesn't have to work, it's really easy to just be like, go play all day. But if they do have to get a job and support themselves in the future, I can understand the trepidation to just blindly be like, okay, I'm going to put my faith in something I know nothing about, I've never experienced, and hope it works. Like I could definitely get that.
Yeah. It's a little better now, and she's our only one, so I'm not too worried. And the great thing is, this was kind of just a happy accident, if that's possible during COVID. But when she switched schools on Zoom. So it's traumatic enough to go to a new school in person where you don't know anybody. Here, she was sitting in our living room, our dining room, and she made friends on Zoom. So when she finally got to go on campus, she already knew people. She already had friends, some she'd met offline before, so it was kind of ideal. And just over the weekend, she mentioned, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I can't wait to go back to school Monday. She's like all excited about it. So yeah, that's good, and it's a public school. So, there's always somebody smarter, and there's always kind of the bullies out there who are going to make life tough, and you have to learn how to deal with all these different types of people. And that was another thing I had a problem with the other school. It was super, like, the teachers never raised their voices. And it was like, and they had I forget what they call it, a mush pit or something, where basically like a punching bag. If somebody got really upset, they go over in the corner and just wail on this, these.
Good.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Like the punching bag thingy.
Right. Better a punching bag than a kid.
Yeah.
But it was like, there was almost not enough,
Substance.
or conflict, it's like, hey, it's great that they talk about problem solving and these are my limits, and everything there's a certain type of vocabulary, which it took me a while, but I came around to understanding the value of it, and I use it with adults. It's
awesome. It's good, but like, that's not how most people operate unless they've been in that system. And so you don't want to be like a lamb to the slaughter and then be 20 and go, oh my God, I can't use these problem solving skills with people because they're being a dick, like you just can't.
Right. That's exactly it. So I think she's getting the best of both worlds. At least that's my hope.
Glorious.
Yeah.
Well, this is why I don't have any and won't be, because I don't want to be doing this. So I'm not talking about other people doing it because it's easy for me, but yeah, no, that's why I'm like, I don't envy any of those decisions because they're definitely not an easy one. So I respect it.
It's yeah. Well, we can have another show titled "Parenthood and the Future of Work." But
there we go. I'll contribute to
that. And you can do all the talking. Pro-parenthood, anti-parenthood.
Here we go.
So this was I'm really glad you suggested this topic, reimagining education and the future of work. It's I feel like we kind of scratched the surface.
I know, right? I'm like, it's giving me so many more ideas. There's so many more things I want to dig into. So I'm like, oh my God, we're already 6 minutes over. I'll make a note. We'll have to revisit this at some point because there's obviously too much here. So.
Ooh, and you know who we should get to talk about it?
Yes.
Professor Munoz.
Johannes. Yep. We drag him in. Educate us about education.
Yeah, well, we actually have him slated for another topic, so we'll maybe we'll get another educator.
There we go. Boom.
We are so enthralling, just the two of us, but okay. So shall we wrap?
Yes, we shall. Yeah, I'm like, this is delightful. It's like, oh my God. Okay, this is wonderful. Okay, yeah. Till next time.
Yeah, and I think that's that next time would be September 23rd.
Woo!
And I think the topic will be politics in the future of work, correct?
I believe it is Dave Burkus. Politics is October 7th.
Oh, you're right. I stand corrected. The topic will be entrepreneurship in the future of work by the man who created entrepreneurship. Well, I shouldn't say that, but he's definitely done it all and seen it all. So that's going to be a good one.
Entrepreneur, if you will.
Yes. Okay, Kirsten. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, always.
Everyone out there in the internet metaverse, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Have a wonderful, wonderful 9/11 reunion with your buds and a lovely rest of the week.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the closing slide here.
I'm waving already.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, sorry about that.
There we go.
Okay, bye-bye.